In a split-second decision, a troubled woman grabs a deputy's cruiser and races through Silver Springs at triple digits, until a collision changes everything. Before we jump into this heartfelt story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you enjoy stories like this, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss another uplifting tale. The mid-afternoon sun beat down on the Forest Plaza parking lot in Silver Springs, Florida, its heat rippling off the asphalt in shimmering waves. Cars glinted under the glare, minivans, pickups, a few dusty sedans, parked in uneven rows outside the strip mall's faded storefronts. A dollar store, a nail salon, a diner with a flickering neon sign. Jenna Carter lingered near the edge of the lot, her worn sneakers scuffing the pavement, her dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail that clung to her sweat-damp neck. At 33, she looked older than her years, lines etched around her hazel eyes, her thin frame hunched in a faded hoodie despite the warmth, her hands twitching with restless energy. She leaned against a rusted shopping cart corral, her gaze darting across the lot, searching for an out. 3 days ago, the diner had fired her. Too many missed shifts, they'd said, her pleas drowned by the manager's curt, "We can't keep you." Eviction loomed, the landlord's last notice taped to her apartment door, and her fridge sat empty, its hum a mocking reminder of the meals she couldn't give her daughter, Mia, now lost to foster care after Jenna's stint in county jail. Her ex's fists, her own unraveling mind. She'd spiraled since then, pills and panic her only companions. Today, desperation clawed at her, a wild thing she couldn't tame, whispering one word: escape. Across the lot, Martha Evans shuffled toward her old Buick, her white hair catching the sun, her hands trembling as she fumbled with a key ring. At 70, Martha moved slow but steady, her floral blouse bright against the gray car, her purse slung over her shoulder after a trip to the dollar store for cat food and batteries. Jenna's eyes locked onto her, the keys glinting, the Buick's faded paint a ticket out of this suffocating town. She pushed off the corral, her pulse hammering, and crossed the lot with purpose, her steps quick but uneven, her mind racing with half-formed plans. Just the keys, just get away, start over somewhere. "Hey, ma'am," Jenna called, her voice shaky but forced bright, closing the gap. Martha turned, her blue eyes narrowing with a flicker of wariness. "Can I help you with that?" Jenna gestured to the bags, her hand inching toward the keys as Martha hesitated. "Oh, I'm fine, dear," Martha said, her tone polite but firm, clutching the key ring tighter. Jenna lunged then, a clumsy grab, her fingers brushing the metal as Martha yanked her hand back, startled. "What are you—" "Stop!" Martha's voice rose, sharp and loud, drawing eyes from a few shoppers nearby. Jenna froze, panic surging, too loud, too fast, and stepped back, her breath ragged as Martha fumbled for her phone. The wail of sirens cut through the air minutes later, 2 Marion County Sheriff's cruisers rolling into the lot, their lights flashing red and blue. Jenna's stomach dropped, her plan crumbling, but her mind spun a new thread. Lie. Play it off. Deputy Mark Rollins stepped out of the lead cruiser, his uniform crisp, his broad frame steady as he scanned the scene. At 40, Mark was seasoned, his brown eyes calm but sharp, his radio crackling with dispatch chatter. "Got a call about a theft attempt," he said, approaching Martha, who waved him over, her voice trembling now. "This young woman, she tried to take my keys." Jenna's heart slammed against her ribs, but she forced her face into a mask of distress, her hands shaking, half real, half act, as she stepped forward. No, that's not— I'm the one who called you," she blurted, her voice pitching high, cracking with feigned fear. "She tried to grab my keys. I'm still shaking." Mark turned, his brow furrowing, caught off guard by her boldness. Martha blinked, incredulous, her mouth opening to protest. "That's not true." But Jenna pressed on, edging closer to Mark's cruiser, its engine still humming, the driver's door ajar. "Please, she scared me so bad," she stammered, her eyes darting to the vehicle, a lifeline shimmering in the chaos. Mark softened, his guard slipping, the 911 caller story plausible enough in the moment. "All right, ma'am, let's sort this out," he said, stepping out fully, his hand resting casually on his belt as he turned to wave his partner over. Jenna's breath hitched. Now or never. The cruiser sat there, keys in the ignition, a heartbeat away, and her desperation roared louder than reason. She'd lost Mia, lost her home, lost everything. Silver Springs was a dead end, And this was her shot, reckless and raw. Her hands trembled, her mind a blur of fear and need as she inched toward the open door. Mark's back half turned, Martha's voice fading into background noise. The lot pulsed with tension. Shoppers pausing. Martha clutching her phone. The second deputy, Lisa Tran, stepping out of her cruiser, her sharp eyes narrowing as she sensed the shift. Jenna's pulse thundered, her body coiled, every muscle screaming to move. Jenna moved, fast and reckless, her sneakers slapping the asphalt as she lunged for the open door. "Hey!" Mark spun, his shout sharp, but she was already sliding across the passenger seat, her hands fumbling for the wheel. "Stop! Stop!" he bellowed, his boots pounding as he reached for her, fingers grazing her sleeve. She slammed the door shut, the lock clicking with a frantic jab of her thumb, and jammed her foot on the gas. The cruiser lurched forward, tires screeching, a jolt of power she hadn't braced for throwing her against the seat as it peeled out of the lot. "Holy, stop it!" Mark's voice faded, his figure shrinking in the rearview mirror as he stumbled back, hands on his head. Jenna's breath came in gasps, her knuckles white on the wheel, the cruiser weaving as she wrestled its unfamiliar bulk. The dashboard blinked with lights, radio static, a speedometer ticking up, 60, 70 miles per hour. As she swung onto the access road, the lot blurring into a smear of cars and shocked faces. Martha stood frozen, her phone still clutched, her blue eyes wide with disbelief while Lisa Tran bolted for her own cruiser, her voice crackling over her shoulder radio. "She's taken Mark's unit eastbound." Inside, the cruiser's interior swallowed Jenna. Leather seats, a shotgun rack, the sharp scent of metal and sweat. Her hands shook, slick with panic as she gripped the wheel tighter, the engine's roar drowning her ragged breaths. "I did it. I'm out," she muttered, her voice breaking, a manic edge threading through it. Silver Springs was a trap, eviction, jail, Mia's absence. And this was her break, her chance to vanish, to start over somewhere, anywhere. The road stretched ahead, a ribbon of asphalt feeding into Highway 40, and she pushed the pedal harder, the speed climbing past 80, the cruiser vibrating under her untrained hands. She fumbled for the radio, its black box a tangle of buttons and dials, her fingers clumsy as she pressed what she hoped was the mic. "Hello? Hello?" she yelled, her voice pitching high, mimicking cop shows she'd binged in better days. Static buzzed back, a hiss of silence, and she tried again, desperation cracking her words. "All right, past station, excuse me, I need the real police." Nothing, no reply, just the hum of the chase she couldn't hear yet, the deputies mobilizing behind her. "No, before you switch, this is wrong," she shouted, slamming the mic down, her chest heaving as the reality hit. She was alone, no plan, no control. The highway opened up, a straight shot west of the substation, cars honking as she swerved past, their horns a distant wail. Her speed ticked up, 90, 95, her eyes darting to the mirrors, expecting lights, sirens, pursuit she couldn't outrun. "Just keep going," she whispered, her voice a plea to herself, her mind flashing to Mia, her daughter's face, 4 years old, lost to foster care after Jenna's arrest. "I'm sorry, baby. I'll fix this," she choked out, tears blurring the road. The cruiser's power a beast she barely tamed. She didn't know where she was headed, north, maybe, out of Florida, but the wheel felt like freedom, even if it trembled in her grip. Back at the lot, Mark sprinted to Lisa's cruiser, his face flushed with shock and fury. "She's got my unit, Highway 40 East," he barked into his radio, sliding into the passenger seat as Lisa floored it, tires squealing. "All stations, suspect female, 30s, driving stolen cruiser, Mark's vehicle," Lisa relayed, her voice clipped, her dark eyes narrowing as she merged onto the highway. Shoppers gawked from the sidelines, Martha sinking onto a curb, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse, muttering, "What's happening?" to no one. The second cruiser's lights flared, its siren slicing the air, the chase snapping into motion. Highway 40 stretched west from Silver Springs like a gray vein through Florida's scrubland, its faded lines blurring under the late afternoon sun as Jenna Carter gripped the stolen cruiser's wheel, her knuckles bone-white against the black leather. The speedometer needle trembled past 95 miles per hour, the engine's roar a deafening pulse that drowned the static crackling from the radio she'd abandoned. At 33, Jenna was a runaway storm, sweat streaking her face, her hazel eyes wild with adrenaline. Her faded hoodie soaked through as she hunched forward, urging the vehicle faster. The world outside smeared into streaks. Pine trees, rusted billboards, cars swerving aside, Silver Springs shrinking behind her, a cage she'd finally broken free from. Her breath came in sharp, uneven gasps, her mind a frantic loop of keep going, don't stop. She'd left the Forest Plaza lot minutes ago. Martha's shout, Deputy Rollins' lunge, the screech of tires, now a jagged memory fueling her flight. The cruiser shuddered as she pushed it to 100 miles per hour, its power a beast she barely controlled, weaving through traffic with clumsy, desperate jerks. Horns blared, a pickup veering onto the shoulder as she shot past, her rearview mirror empty for now. No lights, no sirens. But she knew they were coming. "They won't catch me. Not yet," she muttered, her voice a raw scrape, defiance warring with the fear clawing her chest. Behind her, the pursuit snapped into gear. Deputy Mark Rollins clung to the passenger seat of Lisa Tran's cruiser, his jaw tight, his brown eyes scanning the road as Lisa floored it onto Highway 40. "She's got my unit, heading east past the plaza," he barked into his radio, the crackle cutting through the siren's wail. At 40, Mark was seasoned, but the sting of his lapse, stepping out, leaving the keys, burned hot, guilt and urgency twisting in his gut. Lisa, her dark hair pulled tight, her sharp eyes locked on the asphalt, relayed the alert. "All stations, suspect female, 30s, stolen cruiser, Mark's vehicle, eastbound on 40, high speed." Her voice was clipped, steady, as the speedometer climbed past 80, the second cruiser's lights flaring in their wake. Jenna's world narrowed to the highway, cars scattering, the road bending slightly as she passed the substation, its gray bulk a fleeting blur. Her speed hit 105 miles per hour, the cruiser vibrating, its dashboard lights flashing warnings she didn't understand. She fumbled with the radio again, her trembling hand smacking the mic. "Hello, anyone?" she shouted, static hissing back, her plea lost in the noise. "Come on, I need—" She dropped it, the mic clattering to the floor, her focus snapping back to the road as a minivan loomed ahead. She swerved hard, tires squealing, the cruiser fishtailing before she straightened it, her breath a choked sob. "I'm out. I'm free," she whispered, a mantra to steady her shaking hands, Mia's face flashing in her mind. Her daughter, lost to her failures, a ghost driving her forward. Dispatch crackled through Mark's radio, Sheriff Laura Hayes' voice cutting in. "Unit 733 and 214. Deploy stop sticks at mile marker 26,750. Suspects eastbound, pushing triple digits." Mark gripped the dash, his voice urgent. "She's past the substation, maybe 2 miles out." Lisa nodded, her cruiser hitting 90 miles per hour, weaving through traffic as civilian cars pulled aside, their drivers gawking. Ahead, Deputy Carlos Ortiz positioned his unit across the eastbound lane, stop sticks uncoiling like a black snake across the asphalt, their spikes glinting under the sun. His lights flashed, a beacon Jenna couldn't miss, his radio alive with, "Sticks down, she's closing." Jenna's eyes caught the flicker, red and blue pulsing in the distance, the roadblock looming as her speed nudged 110 miles per hour. "No, no way," she hissed, her foot easing off the gas, her mind racing for an out. The cruiser's momentum carried her forward, the stop sticks a jagged threat she couldn't dodge. "They won't stop me. Not now," she growled, her hands jerking the wheel left, then right, searching the median, a narrow strip of dirt and grass splitting the highway. Her breath hitched, decision snapping into place, and she yanked the wheel hard, the cruiser lurching into a U-turn, tires screaming as it spun across lanes, kicking up dust and gravel. "She's turning around," Mark shouted, his voice cracking over the radio as Lisa slammed the brakes, their cruiser skidding to a halt. "Signal 4, she's westbound now." The alert echoed through dispatch, a frantic relay. "Suspects flipped, heading back west, high speed," as Carlos scrambled to reposition, his stop sticks useless on the eastbound side. Jenna straightened the cruiser, her speed dropping to 80, then surging back to 100, the highway now a reverse gauntlet, oncoming traffic honking as she barreled west. "Woo! Signal 4, Signal 4, she mimicked, a manic laugh bubbling up, her eyes darting to the mirrors, lights flaring behind her now, the chase flipping with her turn. Lisa swung their cruiser into pursuit, her jaw set, her speed climbing to match Jenna's. "She's losing it. West past the substation again," she radioed. Mark's hands clenched, his guilt morphing into resolve. "She's not thinking straight. Pushing that car too hard," he said, his voice low, the highway a blur of green and gray. Jenna's U-turn had flipped the script, her desperation a wildfire now, the road ahead narrowing as traffic thickened. Trucks, sedans, a semi looming in the distance. Her speed steadied at 115 miles per hour, the cruiser rattling, her mind a haze of keep going. Don't stop. The deputies closing in, their sirens a rising wail she couldn't outrun. The chase was alive, a beast she'd unleashed, and its jaws were tightening with every mile. The stolen cruiser roared west on Highway 40, its engine a guttural scream as Jenna Carter pushed it past 115 miles per hour, the asphalt blurring beneath her like a river of gray. The late afternoon sun hung low, casting long shadows across the scrubland. Pine trees and palmettos streaking by, their edges smudged by speed. At 33, Jenna was a shadow of herself, her hazel eyes bloodshot and frantic, her dark ponytail whipping against her sweat-soaked hoodie as she gripped the wheel with trembling hands. The dashboard glowed with warning lights, fuel low, oil pressure dropping, but she didn't see them, her world shrinking to the road ahead, a tunnel of escape she'd carved from desperation. Her breath rasped, shallow and uneven, her chest tight with a mix of adrenaline and dread. The U-turn she'd pulled minutes ago, tires squealing, dust choking the air, had flipped the chase, sending her back toward Silver Springs, away from the stop sticks and flashing lights she'd glimpsed. Now the highway stretched west, a lifeline she clung to, its curves and dips jolting the cruiser as she swerved around slower cars, a minivan, a beat-up hatchback, their horns fading into the roar. "I just need out," she muttered, her voice a broken thread, her eyes darting to the mirrors where red and blue flickered faintly, growing closer but still distant. The deputies were coming, she knew it. But her mind wasn't on them now. It was unraveling, peeling back to the echoes that drove her here. The road blurred into memory. Jenna at 27, her ex, Derek, slamming a fist into the trailer wall, his knuckles bloody, her screams swallowed by Mia's wails from the crib. "You're nothing!" he'd spat, his breath sour with whiskey, her arms bruised from shielding their daughter. She'd stayed too long, trapped by fear and promises until the night he'd thrown her against the fridge, the cops hauling him off as Mia sobbed. Jail followed, petty theft, a spiral of pills to dull the pain. Then Mia was gone, taken by the state, her 4-year-old eyes wide with confusion as a social worker carried her away. "Mom'll fix this," Jenna had whispered then, a lie she'd clung to, now echoing in the cruiser's hum. Her speed nudged 120 miles per hour, the cruiser shuddering, a metal beast she barely tamed. She wiped her face with a trembling sleeve, tears mixing with sweat, her voice cracking as she spoke to the empty air. "I'm sorry, Mia. I'll get you back." The words were a prayer, a delusion, her daughter a ghost in the passenger seat. Dark curls, a gap-toothed smile, lost to foster care 2 years ago. Jenna's life had crumbled since. Jail, parole, a string of dead-end jobs, the diner firing her 3 days back. Eviction loomed, her apartment a hollow shell, and this, stealing Martha's keys, then the cruiser, was her breaking point, a desperate bid to outrun the wreckage she'd become. The highway dipped, a semi-truck looming ahead, its chrome glinting in the sun. Jenna's hands jerked the wheel, the cruiser veering onto the shoulder, gravel crunching as she passed, her speed dropping to 110, then surging back to 117. Her mind flashed again. Parole hearings, her sister Emily pleading, "You need help, Jen." Her own defiance spitting back, "I'm fine." She wasn't. Hadn't been since Derek, since Mia, since the pills she'd flushed last month only to crave every day. "I just need a chance," she whispered, her voice raw, the road a mirror to her chaos. Endless, unforgiving, a path she'd chosen without a map. Behind her, the pursuit tightened, though she couldn't hear it yet. Deputy Mark Rollins leaned forward in Lisa Tran's cruiser, his radio alive with updates. "She's westbound, past the substation again, triple digits." His voice was taut, guilt gnawing at him as Lisa pushed their speed to 95 miles per hour, weaving through traffic. "She's not slowing," he said, his brown eyes scanning the horizon where the stolen cruiser's dust trail lingered. Lisa's jaw clenched, her hands steady on the wheel. She's running blind. Won't last at that pace. Sheriff Laura Hayes cut in over the radio, her tone grim. Units ahead, reposition stop sticks at 26,700. She's coming back your way. The chase was a net closing, but Jenna didn't feel it. Her world was the wheel, the road, the past clawing at her heels. The cruiser rattled, its frame groaning as Jenna hit 122 miles per hour, the semi fading in her mirror, a sedan ahead swerving wide. Her thoughts spun. Emily's last call. You're not alone, Jen. Ignored. The diner's you're done, ringing in her ears. Mia's mama, the day she was taken. I'm not nothing, she growled, her voice rising, a defiant sob breaking free. The highway curved, traffic thickening. A pickup, a delivery van. She swerved again, the cruiser fishtailing, her breath hitching as she straightened it. Her speed climbed to 127 miles per hour, the highest yet, the engine screaming, her mind a fractured reel of regret and rage. The horizon narrowed, the semi-truck reappearing ahead, its bulk a wall she couldn't pass. No! No! She hissed, her foot easing off, then slamming back down, her hands shaking as she veered toward the shoulder again. The deputy's sirens wailed now, a distant howl she finally registered, her mirrors flashing with pursuit. I'm sorry, she whispered. To Mia, to Emily, to herself. A final plea as the road tightened, the semi loomed, and her chaos crested. She was a runaway spark, burning out fast, and the crash she couldn't see was closing in. A collision of her past and the present she'd gambled away. Highway 40 west of Silver Springs trembled under the fading light, the sun a thin orange sliver sinking into the horizon as Jenna Carter's stolen cruiser tore through the dusk at 127 miles per hour. The asphalt hummed beneath her, a relentless blur, the engine scream a jagged symphony drowning the distant wail of sirens. At 33, Jenna was a frayed wire, her hazel eyes glazed with tears and terror, her hands slick with sweat on the wheel, her hoodie a damp shroud clinging to her trembling frame. The semi-truck loomed ahead, its massive silver trailer a wall cutting off her lane, its horn blasting as she veered toward the shoulder, gravel spitting under the tires. Her breath came in shallow bursts, her mind a fractured pulse. Mia's face, Emily's voice, the life she'd lost, driving her past reason. I can make it, she rasped, her voice a desperate thread, her foot locked on the gas as the cruiser shuddered, its frame groaning under the strain. The speedometer pegged out, the needle useless, the dashboard a chaos of flashing red, overheating low fuel, warning she ignored. The semi's driver, a grizzled man named Pete, leaned on his horn again, his eyes wide through the side mirror as Jenna's cruiser shot past, inches from clipping his rig, her speed a blur of white and blue against the darkening road. She swerved back onto the highway, the tires squealing, her heart slamming as she straightened the wheel, the semi shrinking in her mirror. I'm out. I'm free, she choked out, a sob breaking through, but the road ahead wasn't clear. Traffic thickened, headlights flickering in the oncoming lane, a black pickup truck cresting a slight rise. The Harris family rode inside. Tom, 73, at the wheel, his weathered hands steady. Linda, 72, beside him, humming softly. Ray, 74, Tom's brother, dozing in the back, their day trip from Ocala winding down. They didn't see her coming, didn't hear the roar until it was too late. Jenna's speed dropped to 111 miles per hour as she veered again, the cruiser fishtailing, her hands jerking to correct it, a split-second lapse, her focus splintering. The pickup loomed, its headlights a sudden glare, and she yanked the wheel hard too late. No! No! She screamed, her voice swallowed by the impact. A deafening crunch of metal on metal, glass shattering like a gunshot, the cruiser slamming head-on into the pickup at 111 miles per hour. The force threw her forward, the airbag bursting in her face, her body crumpling as the vehicle spun, its hood crumpling into a fiery wreck, sparks showering the asphalt. The pickup buckled, its front end collapsing, flipping onto its side with a sickening screech, sliding across the highway in a tangle of steel and flame. Tom's hands froze on the wheel. Linda's song cut silent. Ray jolted awake only to be crushed against the door, the cab a chaos of twisted metal and blood. Flames licked up from the cruiser's engine, black smoke billowing as gasoline pooled, the air thick with the acrid stench of burning rubber. Signal 4! Signal 4! Crackled over the cruiser's radio, Jenna's last mimicry lost in the static, the mic dangling uselessly as fire swallowed the dash. Deputy Mark Rollins and Lisa Tran rounded the curve 2 miles back, their cruiser's lights slicing the dusk, their speed topping 100 miles per hour when the crash flashed into view. A fireball erupting ahead, debris scattering like shrapnel. "Back up! Back up!" Mark shouted, his voice raw over the radio as Lisa slammed the brakes, their tires skidding, stopping short of the wreckage. "Police cruiser's on fire!" he yelled, leaping out, his boots pounding the pavement as he ran toward the chaos, Lisa on his heels, her radio alive. "All stations, crash at 26700 block, multiple vehicles, signal 4. The scene was a nightmare, flames roaring from the cruiser, its shell unrecognizable. Jenna slumped inside, her head lolling, blood streaking her face, her breath gone. The pickup lay on its side, Tom and Linda pinned in the front, their bodies still. Ray crumpled in the back, a faint groan escaping his lips before it faded. Mark reached the cruiser, heat searing his skin, the fire's roar deafening as he clawed at the door, locked, warped, unyielding. "Jenna, can you hear me?" he shouted, his voice breaking, but no answer came, the flames swallowing her silence. Lisa sprinted to the pickup, her flashlight cutting through smoke, her hands shaking as she checked Tom, pulse gone. Then Linda, her neck twisted, lifeless. "They're down, 2 down," she radioed, her voice tight, moving to Ray, his chest barely rising, blood pooling beneath him. "1 critical, get medics now." Sirens wailed closer, additional units converging, Deputy Carlos Ortiz, Sheriff Laura Hayes, lights painting the highway red and blue. "Stay away from the car," Carlos yelled, pulling Mark back as the cruiser's flames surged, an explosion rocking the night, glass and metal raining down. Emergency crews arrived, extinguishers hissing as they battled the blaze, medics swarming the pickup. Jenna, Tom, and Linda were pronounced dead at the scene, their bodies extracted from the wreckage. Jenna's burned and broken, Tom and Linda's crushed beyond recognition. Ray, airlifted out, clung to life, his breath shallow, his fate hanging in the chaos. Mark sank to his knees by the roadside, his hands blackened, his face ashen, the weight of his unlocked cruiser crashing down. "Are you guys okay?" Lisa radioed, her voice trembling, no response from the void, the highway a graveyard under the dying sun. The Highway 40 crash site glowed under the flicker of emergency lights, a jagged scar of twisted metal and smoldering ash cutting through the Silver Springs dusk. The stolen cruiser's remains hissed as firefighters doused the last flames, its shell a blackened husk. Jenna Carter's body still slumped inside, her final moments etched in the wreckage. Across the road, the Harris family's pickup lay on its side, its cab a crumpled tomb. Tom and Linda lifeless in the front, Ray's frail form extracted by medics. His breath shallow as a helicopter's blades thumped overhead, lifting him toward Ocala Regional Hospital. Deputy Mark Rollins stood by the roadside, his uniform streaked with soot, his brown eyes hollow as he stared at the carnage, the weight of his unlocked cruiser sinking into his bones. Sheriff Laura Hayes arrived, her boots crunching on glass as she surveyed the scene, her stern face pale under the flashing lights. At 50, she'd seen accidents, but this, 4 lives tangled in a stolen unit, was a gut punch. "What happened, Mark?" she asked, her voice low, steady despite the tremor in her hands. He shook his head, his throat tight. "She took it, right out from under me. I didn't lock it." His words broke, guilt choking him as Lisa Tran joined them, her sharp eyes red-rimmed, her radio silent now. "Jenna Carter, 33. Dead on impact," she reported, her voice flat. "Tom Harris, 72. Linda Harris, 73. Same. Ray Harris, 74. Critical. Airlifted out." The night deepened. The highway cordoned off. Traffic rerouted as crews worked. Medics zipping body bags. Tow trucks groaning under the wreckage's weight. Mark lingered, his hands clenched, replaying the moment Jenna slid into his seat. His casual step out, a fatal lapse. Lisa gripped his shoulder, her voice soft but firm. "You couldn't know she'd do this, Mark." He nodded, but the gesture was empty, his mind locked on the fireball that had erupted minutes ago, the lives snuffed out in its wake. Martha Evans, shaken but unharmed, sat in an ambulance nearby, a blanket over her shoulders, her white hair disheveled as she whispered to a paramedic, "I just wanted to get home." Word spread fast through Silver Springs, a small town where tragedy rippled deep. By morning, the crash dominated whispers at the diner, the gas station, the church pews. Jenna Carter, the troubled woman who'd snapped, the Harris family, beloved retirees known for their garden club and quiet kindness. Tom and Linda's son David arrived from Tampa, his face crumpled as he identified their bodies at the morgue, his voice breaking over the phone to his wife. They were just coming home. Ray clung to life in ICU, tubes snaking from his chest, his prognosis grim as doctors murmured about internal bleeding and shattered ribs. 2 days later, Sheriff Hayes faced the press outside the substation, her uniform pressed but her eyes weary. "This was a preventable tragedy," she said, her voice carrying over the hum of cameras. "A stolen cruiser, a high-speed pursuit, 3 civilians and the suspect dead, 1 critical. We're reviewing protocol to ensure this never happens again." Questions flew. Why wasn't the cruiser secured? How did she get away? And Hayes answered with measured calm, but the weight of accountability hung heavy. Mark stood off camera, his badge dull in the sunlight, his silence a shield against the scrutiny he knew was coming. Jenna's sister, Emily Carter, emerged from the shadows, her voice trembling as she spoke to a local reporter. At 35, she bore Jenna's hazel eyes but none of her chaos, her grief raw as she clutched a photo of them as kids. She was lost. Mental health, jail, losing her daughter, it broke her, Emily said, tears streaking her face. She wasn't evil, just desperate. I tried to help, but... Her words trailed off, a plea for understanding drowned by the town's anger and sorrow. The Harris family's loss overshadowed Jenna's story. 3 deaths, a 4th teetering, leaving little room for sympathy in Silver Springs' tight-knit heart. 2 weeks dragged by, the crash site cleared but its echo lingering. Tire marks burned into the asphalt, a charred patch where the cruiser had blazed. Ray Harris fought in the hospital, his family gathered at his bedside, David holding his uncle's hand as monitors beeped. On day 14, the beeps flatlined, Ray's chest stilling, his injuries too vast to overcome. "He's gone," David whispered, his voice hollow, the final toll rising to 4. The news hit the town like a quiet thunderclap, memorials swelling, flowers piling along Highway 40, candles flickering at the Harris home, a community mourning its own. Mark returned to the substation, his suspension lifted but his spirit scarred, his hands shaking as he filed the report. "I should have locked it," he told Lisa over coffee, his voice a rasp. She shook her head, her tone firm. "She made the choice, not you." Sheriff Hayes met with them, her gray eyes steady. "We learn. We move forward. Better training. Tighter security," she said, her resolve a lifeline Mark clung to. The town reeled, its fabric torn, but in the quiet spaces, Martha's shaken prayers, Emily's tearful resolve, seeds of healing stirred, a fragile hope born from the wreckage of chaos. The late November air hung crisp over Silver Springs, Florida, a month after the Highway 40 crash that had ripped through its heart. The once busy stretch of road lay quieter now, its asphalt scrubbed clean of tire marks and ash, though a faint charred patch lingered where Jenna Carter's stolen cruiser had blazed. Wildflowers, yellow and purple gathered by neighbors, lined the shoulder at mile marker 26,700, their blooms a soft memorial to Tom, Linda, and Ray Harris, whose pickup truck had met its end there. A wooden cross, painted white and nailed together by the Harris family's garden club, stood beside the flowers, 3 names etched in careful black script, a silent testament to the lives lost. The town moved slower in the weeks since Ray's death, its rhythm muted by grief. At the diner where Jenna had worked her last shift, regulars sipped coffee in hushed tones, the clatter of plates softer than before. "They were good folks," Old Man Pete said, his grizzled hands wrapped around a mug, his eyes on the empty booth Tom and Linda had favored. "Didn't deserve that." Across town, the Forest Plaza parking lot buzzed with its usual rhythm, shoppers weaving between cars. But Martha Evans moved through it with a cane now, her steps cautious, her white hair catching the sun as she glanced warily at passing strangers, the memory of Jenna's lunge still sharp. Deputy Mark Rollins returned to duty at the Marion County Sheriff's substation, his uniform pressed but his brown eyes shadowed, the weight of that unlocked cruiser a scar he carried daily. At 40 he'd faced tough calls, but this, 4 deaths tied to his laps, haunted him in ways he couldn't shake. He stood in the briefing room, his voice steady as he addressed a row of deputies, their faces a mix of youth and weariness. "Lock your units, every time," he said, his hands clasped tight behind him. 1 second's all it takes." Sheriff Laura Hayes nodded from the back, her gray eyes firm, her new protocol: mandatory key removal, double-checked cruisers, a quiet legacy of the chaos. The Harris family's home on Oak Street stood still, its garden overgrown without Tom's careful hands, Linda's humming absent from the porch. David Harris, their son, sorted through their things: photo albums, a quilt Linda had sewn, Ray's fishing rods. His broad shoulders slumped under the task. "They'd want us to keep going," he told his wife over the phone, his voice thick as he packed a box for donation. The community rallied, casseroles piled on his doorstep, a fundraiser at the church raising funds for a memorial bench. But the silence of their absence lingered, a void no kindness could fill. Jenna's sister Emily Carter stepped into the light at a vigil held at dusk in the town square, a month to the day of the crash. At 35, she stood before a small crowd, neighbors, deputies, Martha among them, her hazel eyes, so like Jenna's, glistening with tears as she held a flickering candle. "Jenna was lost," she said, her voice trembling but clear, cutting through the evening chill. "She fought demons, abuse, losing her girl, her mind breaking, and she couldn't find her way back. She wasn't evil, just hurting. Let's learn from this, please." Her words hung heavy, a plea threading through the town's anger and sorrow, softening some faces, hardening others. Martha Evans lingered after, her cane tapping as she approached Emily, her blue eyes soft with a survivor's grace. "I forgive her," she said quietly, her voice raspy but firm. "Can't carry hate, it's too heavy." Emily nodded, tears spilling, and the two stood in shared silence, candles casting a warm glow on their faces. The vigil stretched late, prayers whispered, songs sung, Silver Springs knitting itself back together, thread by fragile thread, the scars of that day a map of loss and resilience. Sheriff Hayes met with Mark and Lisa Tran at the substation the next morning, her office stark but warm with coffee's scent. "We've got new training modules, vehicle security, pursuit limits," she said, her tone steady, her hands folded on the desk. "This doesn't happen again." Lisa, her sharp eyes thoughtful, nodded. "It's a start." Mark exhaled, his hands unclenching for the first time in weeks. "I'll make it count," he said, his voice low, a vow to the dead and the living. He'd volunteered to lead the sessions, turning his guilt into purpose, a small redemption carved from the wreckage. Martha donated to a mental health fund in Jenna's name, a quiet act announced at the church, her trembling hands passing the check to Pastor Lee. "For others like her," she said, her floral blouse bright against the pews, her resolve a ripple of hope. Emily joined her, speaking at local schools about warning signs, her sister's story a cautionary thread woven into lessons of care. The highway stretched on, its hum a constant under Silver Springs healing, a town bruised but breathing, its people finding light in the cracks. The sun set over the scrubland, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the cross on Highway 40 catching its glow. Mark drove past, his cruiser locked tight, his eyes lingering on the flowers, a silent salute to the lessons etched in asphalt and memory. Silver Springs bore its scars, grief, guilt, a community reshaped, but in its quiet corners, hope flickered, a testament that even from chaos, something enduring could grow. The dust settled on Highway 40, but Silver Springs didn't stay broken. The crash that claimed Jenna Carter, Tom, Linda, and Ray Harris left a town reeling, grief carved into its streets, etched in the flowers lining the roadside, whispered in the quiet of empty homes. Yet from that wreckage, something enduring took root. Deputy Mark Rollins turned his guilt into a shield, training others with a resolve forged in loss, ensuring no key goes unchecked, no second slips by. Emily Carter stepped from her sister's shadow, her voice trembling but strong, speaking at vigils and schools about the unseen battles that drive us to the edge, turning Jenna's chaos into a call for compassion. Martha Evans, frail but fierce, chose forgiveness over hate, her small donation to mental health a ripple of grace in a sea of sorrow. Jenna's desperate run ended in flames, but it lit a fire in Silver Springs, a reminder that even our worst moments can spark change. This story isn't just about a crash, it's about what rises after, how we mend, how we learn, how we find light in the darkest miles. Every scar holds a lesson, every fall a chance to stand taller. If this tale of grit and redemption moved you, hit that subscribe button below. Join our community for more stories that dig deep, lift high, and keep you coming back for the hope that shines through.